A German reconnaissance pilot scans the mountains below him. Snow-covered peaks, quiet villages, wooden chalets with smoke lazily drifting from chimneys. No flak, no fighters, no signs of resistance. He keys the radio. "Nothing here," he reports. "Just rocks, cows, and silence." And then, the mountain moves. Not metaphorically, physically. A section of cliff slides open like a hidden door. From inside the rock, steel barrels push forward. Long, heavy, aiming straight up at the sky. The pilot doesn't even have time to swear, because the Alps just fired back. You can almost feel his stomach drop as black puffs of anti-aircraft fire explode around the aircraft. This wasn't a village. This wasn't a harmless, neutral country. This was a trap. And Switzerland had just revealed its teeth. To understand what just happened, you have to forget everything you think you know about Switzerland in World War II. Neutral, peaceful, banking, chocolate, watches. That image? That was camouflage, because behind it was something far more dangerous. In 1940, while Europe was collapsing under Nazi boots, Switzerland was doing something insane. They were hollowing out their own country, literally. Deep inside the Alps, Swiss engineers drilled tunnels the size of subway stations. Entire hospitals were buried in mountains. Command centers, ammunition depots, barracks, power plants, all hidden behind rock faces that looked completely natural from the outside. This wasn't paranoia. This was strategy. It was called the National Redoubt, or in French, Réduit National, and the idea was simple, brutal, and terrifyingly clever. If Germany invades, we disappear into the mountains, and then we bleed them dry. The Swiss knew something in 1939 that most of Europe refused to accept. Hitler did not respect neutrality. Austria was neutral. It vanished in a weekend. Czechoslovakia tried diplomacy. It was carved up. Poland fought back. It was crushed from both sides. So Switzerland looked at the map and asked a different question. How do we make invasion not worth it? The answer wasn't more tanks. They didn't have the manpower for that. The answer was geography. The Alps already made movement slow, supply lines fragile, and armor nearly useless. The Swiss just decided to turn that natural barrier into a weaponized maze. Bridges were rigged with explosives, not as a last resort, but as a first move. If German armor crossed the border, entire valleys could be collapsed in minutes, roads erased, tunnels sealed, railways dropped into ravines, and every single demolition charge was pre-wired, pre-mapped, and rehearsed. This wasn't improvisation. This was a country preparing to self-destruct on command. But the real shock wasn't the explosives, it was the disguise. From the air, German pilots saw barns, just barns, but inside those barns, tanks. From the valley floor, infantry saw wooden houses, normal Alpine homes, but behind those walls, machine gun nests, observation slits, reinforced concrete thick enough to shrug off artillery. Some fortresses had fake windows painted on the outside. Others had doors that led nowhere, pure deception. And the guns were the worst part, because they weren't sitting out in the open like French Maginot bunkers. They were invisible. Artillery pieces were hidden behind silent rock panels, retractable steel doors, even fake waterfalls. When not in use, the mountain looked untouched. When activated, the mountain became a battleship. German intelligence officers started calling Switzerland the Porcupine. Small, quiet, but covered in spikes. And Switzerland didn't just prepare to fight Germany, they prepared to fight everyone. Their airspace was sacred. German planes crossed it, intercepted. Allied planes crossed it, intercepted. In one incident, Swiss Messerschmitt Bf-109s, yes, the same model used by the Luftwaffe, shot down German aircraft violating Swiss airspace. Berlin was furious. Hitler demanded apologies. The Swiss response was simple. These are our skies. Neutral didn't mean passive. Neutral meant armed to the teeth. By 1940, Switzerland had mobilized over 400,000 soldiers in a country of barely 4 million people. That's not neutrality. That's a nation standing on a trigger. Inside the mountains, life continued in silence. Soldiers trained underground for months at a time. Medical staff rehearsed mass casualty scenarios in hidden hospitals that could operate completely cut off from the outside world. Food stockpiles were designed to last years, not weeks, years. The plan was terrifyingly realistic. If Germany invaded the lowlands, the Swiss army would retreat into the Alps, the cities would be abandoned, the banks, the factories, the flatlands, all sacrificed. And then, Germany would be forced to fight uphill, through narrow passes, against an enemy that never needed to come out. Every mile would cost blood, every supply convoy would be hunted. Victory wouldn't be impossible, just too expensive. And that's when something interesting happened. German planners started running the numbers. They looked at France, easy to roll over once the line was broken. They looked at Switzerland and saw months, maybe years of brutal mountain warfare for almost no strategic gain. No oil, no ports, no real industry worth the cost, just pain. Even Hitler, who loved bold moves and dramatic conquests, hesitated. Switzerland wasn't unconquerable, but it was unprofitable, and in war, that matters a lot. High above the Alps, German pilots stopped flying low. They stopped assuming, because now they knew something everyone else didn't. Those peaceful mountains, they were loaded. And somewhere behind a rock face, behind a fake barn, behind a painted window, someone was already aiming back. But here's the real question. If Switzerland was so prepared, so armed, so ready to fight, why didn't they ever have to? By late 1940, Berlin knew exactly what was hiding inside those mountains. German intelligence had maps, photos, intercepted reports. They knew about the tunnels, the demolition zones, the artillery nests carved straight into granite. They knew that every major alpine pass was pre-sighted, pre-ranged, and prepped to turn into a kill zone the moment boots crossed the border. And still, they kept testing. Just little probes, little violations, planes drifting a few kilometers into Swiss airspace, recon flights flying just low enough to provoke a response. And every time, the Swiss answered, fast. Fighters scrambled within minutes, anti-aircraft batteries tracked targets instantly. Pilots were warned once, maybe twice, then fired on. This wasn't panic fire. This was confidence. And confidence is dangerous. Hitler hated uncertainty. He liked clean victories, big arrows on maps, blitzkrieg, shock and collapse. Switzerland offered none of that. Instead, it offered a nightmare scenario straight out of World War I, but vertical. Mountain warfare is slow, brutal, logistically hellish. Tanks are useless, trucks can't maneuver, aircraft struggle with weather, altitude, and visibility. And the Swiss knew this. They trained specifically for it. Units memorized their valleys like neighborhoods, every bend in the road, every slope, every place where an ambush would hurt the most. Machine gun positions overlapped. Artillery could hit the same target from multiple hidden angles. If German troops pushed in, they wouldn't face a front line. They'd face layers. Pull back, collapse a bridge, seal a tunnel, open fire from the heights, then disappear again. Advance would mean climbing under fire. Retreat would mean falling into pre-sighted artillery. Either way, you paid. But here's the part most people miss. The Swiss weren't just planning to defend, they were planning to outlast. Their economy was reorganized for siege conditions. Fuel was rationed, civilian infrastructure was hardened, even schools drilled evacuation and blackout procedures. And underground? That's where things get eerie. Some mountain fortresses had living quarters so deep and sealed that soldiers could operate for months without seeing daylight. Artificial lighting, air filtration systems, water sourced from underground springs. Entire command chains could function even if the surface was bombed flat. The idea wasn't to win quickly. The idea was to make the war drag on. Because every extra week Germany spent bleeding in the Alps was a week they weren't using elsewhere, and Germany was already stretched thin. At one point, invasion plans did exist. They even had a name, Operation Tannenbaum. On paper, it looked doable. German and Italian forces attacking from multiple directions, a coordinated push, overwhelming numbers. But when planners started simulating outcomes, the tone changed. Loss estimates climbed, timelines stretched, supply requirements exploded. And the payoff? Minimal. Switzerland didn't threaten Germany. It wasn't an allied base. It wasn't blocking access to oil or oceans. Invading it wouldn't win the war, but it could absolutely lose time. And in a global conflict, time is blood. Meanwhile, the Swiss kept acting like invasion was coming tomorrow. Mobilization orders stayed active, training never slowed, demolition charges were maintained and rechecked constantly. Some bridges were wired so thoroughly that engineers joked they could be blown by accident if someone sneezed too hard. That's not fear, that's commitment, and it sent a message louder than any speech. We're not bluffing. German officers stationed near the border noticed something unsettling. Swiss soldiers weren't nervous, they weren't edgy, they weren't twitchy. They were calm. They knew exactly where they would go if the order came, which tunnel, which gun, which bunker. That kind of readiness messes with you because it suggests something worse than aggression: acceptance. A country that has already accepted destruction is incredibly hard to intimidate. But neutrality has a price. Switzerland was surrounded by Axis-controlled territory. Trade was restricted. Diplomacy was a constant balancing act. One wrong move could be interpreted as provocation. So they walked a razor's edge. They traded, they negotiated, they stayed officially neutral. But militarily, they stayed locked and loaded. And everyone knew it. Allies respected it. Axis feared it. Switzerland became this strange anomaly, a loaded gun sitting untouched in the middle of a burning house. By 1943, the war had shifted. Germany was bogged down in the east. The Allies were gaining momentum. Resources were tighter, manpower thinner. Invading Switzerland now made even less sense than before. The Porcupine didn't need to fight. It just needed to stay sharp. And it worked. But that leads to the final, uncomfortable truth. Switzerland's defense wasn't just about bunkers and guns. It was about psychology, deterrence, the art of convincing your enemy that the cost is too high before the first shot is ever fired. And that raises one last question. If war is about power, did Switzerland actually win a battle that never happened? By 1944, the truth had settled in across Europe. Switzerland wasn't lucky. Switzerland was calculated. While cities burned and borders vanished, that small alpine nation remained intact, not because it hid, but because it made itself too painful to touch. This is the part of the story that feels almost uncomfortable. No dramatic last stand, no ruined capitals, no famous invasion footage, just silence. And that silence was intentional. Inside the mountains, the Redoubt stayed ready until the very end. Artillery crews drilled as if an attack could come tomorrow. Engineers rechecked charges on bridges that were never crossed by enemy tanks. Medical units rehearsed casualty flows that never arrived. Some soldiers served their entire wartime duty underground, never once seeing combat, but always prepared for it. That kind of readiness doesn't come from hope. It comes from acceptance. The Swiss High Command had already decided. If invasion came, Switzerland might not survive as a country on the surface, but it would survive as a problem. And problems drain empires. When the war finally ended in 1945, Allied intelligence officers were allowed to tour parts of the Swiss fortification system. What they found shocked even hardened veterans. Gun emplacements perfectly preserved, ammunition stocks untouched, hospitals fully operational, waiting for casualties that never came. Some bunkers were so well concealed that officers walked past them repeatedly without realizing they existed, until a door silently opened in solid rock. The Alps hadn't fired in anger, but they had spoken. The legacy of the National Redoubt didn't end with World War II. During the Cold War, Switzerland expanded and modernized many of these installations. Some remained classified for decades. Others were only revealed in the 1990s when secrecy was finally lifted. And the lesson endured. You don't always deter an enemy by being the strongest. Sometimes you deter them by being the worst possible option. Think about it. Germany conquered France in 6 weeks, but Switzerland? They never even tried. Not because they couldn't win, but because winning would hurt too much. That's a rare kind of power. The power of terrain, the power of preparation, the power of credibility. Switzerland didn't shout, they didn't threaten. They just quietly made sure everyone understood the price. Today, tourists hike those same mountains. They take photos of chalets. They admire waterfalls. They ride trains through tunnels carved into rock. Most of them never realize what's behind the walls, that the scenery once stared down the most powerful military machine in Europe and didn't blink. So when people say Switzerland did nothing in World War II, they're wrong. Switzerland turned their entire country into a loaded question. Is this really worth it? And in the end, no one dared to answer.